Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week from the Missouri Ozark Mountains here in the United States of America. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is not correct in a lot of locations on the Internet. So here's the one that works, 712-770-9418, 712-770-9418. Tomorrow, it looks like we might have G here on USA Prepares. And it looks like Joe's going to be here from guns80.com. And G's going to be talking about historical things and fakes, counterfeits, frauds, antiques, things that, and history. And Joe's going to be talking about 80% finished lower receivers for AR-15 rifles and pistols. And how literally you, with a drill press, can finish the receiver. You get all the parts you need, the drill bits, the milling bit, everything you need, the jig, everything, to finish your receiver, finish to 20%. It'll take you about an hour. And you can have a unreported, absolutely legal pistol or rifle. No kidding. And we'll tell you where to buy it, how much it costs, how it works, all those kinds of things. And a number of our class have bought them, and they work. So that'll be tomorrow. And then Friday, Kevin's going to be talking with us, Kevin in Florida and Kathy in Ohio. So that's the rest of the week. Right now, Guineith Isaacs, live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Wow, what a mess in Melbourne, Australia.
I know.
You want to tell us about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These nine apartment buildings, the only thing that I can think to describe it as is this is a war crime. This is something that is ghettoization of the worst kind, meaning this is this guy Daniel Andrews, what he's done is he's locked down these 9 apartment buildings. Nobody can enter, nobody can leave. They're running out of food. They're running out of things like infant formula and baby nappies. There's diapers. They're not able to go out to exercise. And, it's just a mess. And I was actually listening to another radio broadcast, and they pointed out something very interesting, which is that a lot of the things that our governments are doing to us these days fit the category of being a war crime under the Geneva Convention and the definition that Amnesty International uses. And I think this would be one of them. Locking people inside their homes, depriving them of food, depriving them of social contact. And some of these people who are living in these apartment buildings are old people, and some of them don't speak English. They have no idea what's going on. Some of them some of them are refugees. They come from war-torn countries. And this is sending them into attacks of post-traumatic stress disorder because they think that it's happening again in this country where they thought they would find safety of what had happened in their previous country, because this is the sort of thing that happens in third world tyrannical regimes. And that is how low our state premier, Daniel Andrews, has sunk. He is like a third world dictator. I'm not even kidding. You know, this is sort of, he's been deeply unpopular here for many, many years. You know, I don't even know why he's still the premier, actually. The elections must be rigged because nobody here seems to like him, because he has been behaving himself like a dictator for many, many years. And it's gotten to the point where, you know, in the past there's been things like, well, he's, you know, basically sent a SWAT team to people that I know's places because they breed puppies, basically. That's, you know, and he's shut down their $1 million businesses. Some of them had $1 million businesses of dog breeding. Some of them were retail traders doing a retail trade in puppies, and he would shut them down too. And some people that I know that he did this to, they lost their lives. They had heart attacks because he shut down their business. He sent a SWAT team around to stop them from breeding dogs when they had first-class, multi-million-dollar dog breeding facilities. This isn't a dog breeding facility. This is human beings. It's 1,000 times worse. You know, and he has sent a patrol of 500 police per shift to guard these 9 apartment buildings across 2 suburbs. Okay? 500 people to guard 9 apartment buildings across 2 suburbs per shift. And those police will not even go into the buildings. They're all frightened of getting this coronavirus. They won't go into the buildings. So if there's a problem, you know, they're on their own. How's that? That's just absolutely atrocious, you know? And, you know, these people are really, really, the word that I've been hearing in broadcast after broadcast from people who have actually been living in these buildings is, we're panicking. That is a very, very scary word to use. And he is absolutely behaving himself like a third world dictator, and it absolutely needs to stop. Does that? Yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, but you know,
Guineith, Guineith, let me share this with you. Before I met you years ago, if I thought about Australia, here's what would come to mind. Now, class, this is not correct, but this is what would come to my mind years ago. Okay, I studied about world geography in elementary school, as many of you did, and I looked at the flat maps and I looked at the globe, and so when I thought of Australia, I would think of this very large, out of the way, idyllic island continent with lots of land, lots of space, lots of freedom, people doing what they wanted to do, and with a low cost of living. That's what I thought. I don't think very much of that's true. The part about the island is true. The island continent, that's true. Lots of land, that's true. Lots of space, that's true. Lots of freedom, that's not true. Low cost of living, that's not true. Would you say that I have realized that what I thought was Australia was not true, and what I now believe about Australia is true?
I would say that what you now believe about Australia is absolutely true. We've got total tyranny happening here in Australia, and it's so bad. I think personally, this is not what is being broadcast in the media here. I don't think that they would. I think that there would be a riot or an outbreak of warfare if this was broadcast. But I think personally, I suspect personally, that the rest of Australia has, this is the other thing that's happened. that Australia has quarantined off Victoria. They have shut all of their state boundaries to the 3 states that they border, which is South Australia, New South Wales, and there's a sea boundary to the south to Tasmania. And all 3 of those boundaries are now shut off, and people are not allowed to enter or leave the state. And what I think has happened is that all the premiers and the federal government have gotten together privately and decided that they are going to give Victoria to the Communist Chinese. That's what I personally suspect. That's what I personally think may have happened. And that we in the general public just haven't been told about it yet. Because they are actually flying Communist Chinese flags on flagpoles outside of Melbourne municipal buildings, especially the Whitehorse City Council, which is around Box Hill in Melbourne, which is a suburb of Melbourne, and also other Melbourne municipalities as well have started. And you know something? If you fly another country's flag on your flagpole outside of one of your buildings, one of your official buildings in your country, unless there is a visiting dignitary from that nation that is there visiting, okay? But if you do it as a regular matter of course, that's called treason, because that means that you have signed yourself over to that nation, okay? And that is what the municipalities in Melbourne are doing. They are flying Chinese communist flags on their flagpoles. And I think that all of the Australian governments have all gotten together and have decided to sell Victoria to the Chinese in return for them getting left alone. I personally suspect that that's what's happened. And that's the real reason why that the state boundaries have been closed, and that they're using this whole quarantine story as a cover story so that people don't panic. But there have been dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people fleeing the state, if they at all possibly can, before the lockdown of the state became hard. There were dozens of people fleeing across the boundary. They did not want to get stuck in here. I'm still here. I'm in Victoria. It's not so easy for me to just up sticks and move, because I have a farm and I have animals and, you know, I've got a family and all the rest of it. And I can't just up sticks and leave it all. And, you know, I just have to pray for God's protection on me. But it's certainly not a very comforting thought, because the Chinese are the most despotic regime that the world has ever known. And I pray to God that I'm wrong. But I really suspect I might be right, and that may account for the recent behaviour of the state premier, because he's always been a dishonourable piece of work, Daniel Andrews. He's been like this for years. But
Gwyneth, hold that thought. We're going into a break. We'll be right back. We'll be talking about the Queen as well today. I see a call on the call screen, and Jason will get to you if you just stand by. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Gwyneth, headlines on Yahoo News. Panic buying returns to Melbourne, or as Melbourne braces for lengthy lockdown. And it goes on to say queues, Queues, meaning people are lined up. Queues of cars were backed up at Victoria's border after neighboring New South Wales closed the boundary, essentially sealing off the state from the rest of Australia. And so it looks like that has already happened. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can understand why they want to leave. Because, like I say, I think that a lot of people might be thinking exactly what I've been thinking, in that we're being sold as a state to the Chinese Communist Party as basically to be converted into a Chinese colony. That's what I suspect. Nobody has told me that. I don't think they would tell me that. I think that there would be panic and there would be an outbreak of war. If that happened.
And the problem is, if there were an outbreak of war, the problem is you've been relieved of your firearms, your rifles, pistols, shotguns, and revolvers.
Well, that might be true in the metropolitan area, but there's still a lot of firearms, unregistered and registered, in the farming areas of Victoria. So a lot of farmers simply, they saw what was, they saw the writing on the wall, and they simply didn't bother to register their firearms. Okay? That's what happened with a lot of farms in Victoria. And that's just the word on the grapevine. I don't know of anybody in particular, okay? But I think that Melbourne would go under fairly quickly as a Chinese colony. But I also think that there would be a considerable amount of guerrilla warfare in Melbourne, because the thing about Victorians is they have this particular mindset, and there's a very strong culture all through Victoria, including Melbourne, and that is what I've defined as the Eureka and Ned Kelly mindset, and that is the Eureka Stockade was it was an attempt to establish an independent nation in the very early days of Victorian history. I think it was about 1856 that the people of Ballarat, they got together and they made a fort at a place called Eureka in Ballarat, and they declared that they weren't going to pay their taxes and that they were going to establish their own little country in Ballarat. And that was called the Eureka Stockade. And, of course, it ended up with them all getting murdered by the Crown, basically, most of them. It wasn't successful, but the mindset never went away. The secessionist attitude never went away. And Ned Kelly was a famous Victorian outlaw, and he was another one who was a Victorian secessionist. He believed that Victoria ought to be its own nation. And, so there are a lot of people who are deeply dedicated to this state of mind, who live in Victoria. And you see it everywhere. It's like you go to the south, or in the good old days, with the Dukes of Hazzard, and you'd see Confederate flags everywhere because they love the idea of the Confederacy, right? And it's that degree of devotion that people in Victoria, many white Australians in Victoria, have to this idea of Eureka and Ned Kelly. Okay? They're not going to be swayed from that, ever. And
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Arjun is calling in from New Jersey. We'll be right with you after the break, Arjun. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Arjun joining us via telephone in New Jersey. Welcome, Arjun.
Thank you, Vince. I wanted to talk about, there is a book called there is a writer, Sun Tsu, and he wrote like this Art of War, and this is quite ingrained in all these Chinese guys. And he writes that to fight and conquer all in your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking enemies' resistance without fighting. I try to explain to people that this coronavirus is a biological weapon, and a lot of people who have like their mindset not set on it, they don't actually believe it. Occupation has been the Chinese mantra from a very, very long time. Like in 1964, they acquired the atomic weapon, and in 1968, they actually attacked Russia. And the thing is that like Russians actually killed close to 800 Chinese, and Russians, like there were like 60 Russian soldiers died. And then after that, they have very good relations with Russia. They never mess with Russians anymore. Now currently China shares like a boundary with 13 nations, but it has problem with 23 nations currently. There used to be a country which is actually 60% of the China currently. Used to be a country called Tibet. So in around 1950s, they actually took all the people who were living in Tibet, they brought them into mainland, they built their roads, and they brought all their military. They killed close to 1 million Tibetans there and occupied that complete Tibet area. Then recently what they are doing is like they are building, what they do is like the countries that they actually that are poor, they will actually build like a China-Pakistan economic corridor, and they will actually put them in debt. And the things are like, and then they will say that like, okay, we will use your military bases. And similar thing they are doing with Sri Lanka also. There is a country called Nepal. So there is a prime minister there. His name is like Oli. They pay him the ambassador, like the Chinese ambassador. She is very pretty, and she actually did like a sort of a honey trap on this prime minister. And this prime minister, they pay him like close to $70,000 every day. And they made him, and now the thing is that like they have taken 8 of their villages, of this Nepal's villages, and they show them on their map, and they show the whole Himalaya is just Chinese now. So I mean, like they have like different wars that are coming up, and these are like 7, 8. It is called like unification of Taiwan, which is 2020 to 2035, reconquest of southern Tibet, which is 2035 to 2040. Reconquest of Spratly Island, which is 2025 to 2030. Reconquest of Daewoo Island. These are Senkaku Islands. Japan. These are Japan's islands. They say that they are mine, and they say that they will conquer by 2040 to 2045. Unification of Mongolia 2045 to 2050. Taking back land lost to Russia 2055 to 2060. Now, Sun Tsu also writes, appear weak when you are strong.
Arjun, slow down a little bit, please. Slow down a little bit, please. We want to make sure we hear every word you have to say. By the way, class, if you want to buy the book that Arjun is talking about, Sun Tsu's The Art of War, it is available on eBay right now, and you'll be able to buy it for about $5 plus a little bit of shipping, used. So please continue, and then I'd like to hear Gwyneth's comments.
Yes. So Sun Tsu also writes that appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. So I think like they are trying to propagate wars everywhere right now. And what they actually want to do is like currently their objective is Taiwan, and they want to occupy the whole South China Sea. So the thing is that like in South China Sea, there is a $3 trillion of trade that happens every year. So if everyone has to register with them, if they occupy the whole sea, then the thing is that like they will be extremely, extremely rich and prosperous. And the thing is that like 30% of the oil comes from that sea, 40% of, and the gas, there is a lot of gas in that sea. So they actually sink the vessels, these fishing ships, like of Vietnam and whatnot. That's why all these US ships are there. So the thing is that like, I will tell you what I'm doing to resist this. Yesterday, actually, by mistake, I bought like a product which was like made in China. And I came back to my home. Then I went back and it was just $2, nothing more. It's very less, just $2. I went back and I returned it. What I'm going to do from my side is I'm never going to buy any Chinese product. If the product is going to cost $100, I will pay $100. And I will try to resist as much as I can not to buy Chinese products. From
Arjun, let me just make it.
Yes.
Let me make a quick comment. I think we have the point.
Yes.
So I agree with you. I agree with you about buying Chinese products. And so here's how I feel about it. Right now, if you want to buy an air conditioner, a window type air conditioner, if you want to buy a refrigerator or a freezer or an appliance or something that's electronic, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to buy it from someplace other than Chinese origin. Now, I understand that, and we have not rebuilt our manufacturing system since the politicians have thrown American factories away in favor of giving them to China. So, I think that it is morally okay right now to buy used things that are already here, that people have already paid their sales tax on, that are used that they don't want, that came from China. Because if you want them, you're not going to be able to get them anyplace else. Now I'm talking about wrenches, I'm talking about tools, I'm talking about pretty much everything. So until we rebuild our American factories, we're going to have to use what's already here. But I wouldn't give them another cent. I wouldn't give 1 cent to China. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and I'd love to hear Gwyneth's comments. Hong Kong is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. Now, I remember that around 1999 or 2000, that Hong Kong would be officially Chinese territory. However, there was a lot of resistance because the people of Hong Kong don't want to be under the Chinese rule. But, and the reason I know this is I worked for a bank, and the name of the bank was HSBC. HSBC stands for Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. That's a Chinese bank. So, class, maybe if you have some dealings with those guys, you might also want to close your accounts. If you want to follow the advice of origin, returning as much as or as little as $2 of Chinese manufactured content. Gwyneth, any comments?
Yeah, I have a copy of The Art of War here at home, a physical copy of The Art of War. And I think that everybody at this stage ought to go out and buy a copy of The Art of War. And I was speaking with a friend of mine who is a military veteran, and he said, "Oh, why did you buy that book? Why have you got that book? These people are our enemies." And I said, "Listen, I know they're our enemies, but it's like this. When Rommel was, when General Patton was fighting the army of Erwin Rommel at the Battle of Kasserine Pass, he said, he was winning, and he seemed to know every move that Rommel was going to make ahead of time. And he was heard to comment to himself by one of, he used to comment things to himself all the time. And he was heard to comment to himself by one of his senior officers, one of his senior aides, "Rommel, you magnificent BAST something, something, something. I've read your D book." And
that's exactly right.
Need to read the
That's
Chinese
exactly right.
D book at this time to figure out, because every Chinese army officer, every recruit, they're all made to study The Art of War by Sun Tsu. And I think that if it continues on in the West the way that it is, that book may become unobtainable in English. Okay? At the moment, it is available in English. And I think that people ought to read all the Chinese classics just to figure out how these people think and how they act, because it's all stealth. It's all thinking in non-linear fashion, okay? And if you understand the Chinese mode of thought, then what they're doing absolutely makes sense, and you can recognize that this is an attack, that this is a military takeover. But if you are not used to thinking in the Chinese way, you think, oh yeah, this is happening over here, this is happening over there. They're not related. and it's not necessarily anything that's hostile to us. But if you've read the I Ching and the Art of War especially, and I have physical copies of both of those books in English, and I would recommend, if anyone wants to buy the I Ching, I found that the most useful translation is the translation by James Legge. That's Legge. If you want to get Legge's translation of the I Ching, it has appendices. It's very, very useful, and it has cultural notes. It has, descriptions of the mythology surrounding the various idioms that are used, because some of the idioms are, if you don't know the background of Chinese culture, they just seem weird. But I think that people at the moment need to learn about Chinese mythology, and they need to learn about Chinese military tactics, because these people are really, really dangerous to everybody in the West at the moment, and especially to us here in Victoria. And that's why people would note a sense of alarm in my voice as I'm broadcasting today. That better be right, I'm alarmed. I'm ringing the alarm bells loud and clear, and I'm shouting from the rooftops. These people are here. They're going to take over. They have taken over Victoria. As far as I'm concerned, until I'm proven wrong, our state has been given by the Australian federal government with the collusion of every state government in in Australia. Our state of Victoria has been given to the Chinese as a colony. That is the real reason for the border closures. And if somebody wants to prove me wrong, prove me wrong. That's my challenge to anybody out there. Prove me wrong. Why are we flying Chinese flags from our municipal buildings in our state if we have not been taken over and set up as a colony by the Chinese? And this is really dangerous, because this is what they do. They've gone in the back door. And Victoria is Australia's back door. It's where all of our telecommunications are based, and it's where all of our mail systems are based. And all of the mail in and out of Australia all comes through Victoria.
All right, we'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs. Arjun, you're certainly welcome to hold with us. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Arjun's with us in New Jersey. I just wanted to make a comment. You all have heard of OPEC, O-P-E-C. It is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. It was founded in 1960. And the initial founding members were Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. And there are now 13 member countries. That is OPEC. And we consider those guys the big oil producers, right? OPEC. Well, there's another organization, SIN OPEC, S-I-N-O-P-E-C. And this SIN OPEC group is the world's largest oil refining, gas, and petrochemical conglomerate in the world. It's the world's largest. And it's headquartered in Beijing, China. So their business includes oil and gas exploration, refining, marketing, production and sales of petrochemicals, chemical fibers, chemical fertilizers, and other chemical products, and the storage and pipeline transportation of crude oil, natural gas, and crude oil related products. It produces ethanol, biofuels, biodiesel, and more. It's huge. And it was founded in the year 2000. That's 20 years ago. So it went from being founded, now it started with other corporations and amalgamated them, if you will, but it's now the biggest. And it's Chinese. So don't think that they're not paying attention to business. They really are. And they're number one in a lot of areas. Electronics, manufacturing. Now, what we do here in the United States, we do better than anybody else. And that would be, well, we used to, job shops. And a job shop is if we wanted to make one of something, a prototype, for example, nobody was better than the United States at making one. Chinese can't make one. They do not know how to make one, but they know how to make 1,000,000. And they can make 1,000,000 better than anybody else. So we can make one, we can make the first one, they can copy it, make it 7/8 scale or half scale or 2x scale, and they can make 1,000,000 of them. Really, really fast. But it's really tough for them to make the first one. So that's kind of a difference between us and the Chinese. They are eating our lunch. We are buying their junk. We're buying their junk. And they are taking our money and they're burying us with it. And there's an article. I got a copy of, well, Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight sells Chinese junk, right? That's what they do, Chinese tools. Well, they make a jack stand. And what's a jack stand? So a jack stand is a device. You raise your car up, and then you want to put it on something that's not going to collapse. You don't want to leave your car up in the air when you crawl under it if it is under hydraulic pressure, meaning you don't want to lift it with a hydraulic jack and then crawl under it because the hydraulics may fail and you may get crushed. So what you do typically would be raise the car up and then put it on jack stands. And these are really supposedly sturdy, non-collapsible stands, and they're rated at X number of tons or pounds. Well, the Chi-Coms made them, Harbor Freight sold them, and now there's a recall because the welds were substandard, like pretty much all the Chinese welds. Just go look at Harbor Freight's welds, and you'll see how cheesy they are on almost all their products. Okay, they're not straight, they're not level, they're not smooth, they're not uniform, the penetration is not right. They're lousy, in my opinion. Well, so what did Harbor Freight do? They had a recall. I got an email from them. Hey, y'all have these jacks. We got a problem with them. Not only do we have a problem with them, we have the ones that we replaced, the ones that we recalled with. So the first iteration was defective, and we replaced them with a new and improved defective iteration. Now, so if you bought a 3-ton jack stand, you can get a cash refund of $24.99, or a store credit of $29.99. Or if you got the 6-ton model, $49.99 cash refund, or $59.99 store credit. Or if you bought the 12-ton model, and they come in the sale flyers and say, hey, wow, I can get a jack stand from Harbor Freight. Boy, don't they look great. The 12-ton model has a cash refund of $119.99 or $143 store credit. What I'm telling you is be really careful of buying Chinese products, new and used. Any comments, Guineith?
Yeah, 12 tons is really going to hurt if it lands on your chest.
Yes, Arjun, any comments?
Yes, the thing that this is all, this is all Chinese propaganda, and I hear the music. If you want, I can stay or I can leave, yeah.
Arjun, Guineith has a whole bunch on the blackboard for today. I appreciate you calling in. You can feel free to call in anytime. All we need to do is stay on topic, and that's for everybody on USA Prepares. Let's just stay on topic. And Arjun, you have. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, Guineith and I will be right back after these news and commercial announcements. This is USA Prepares. I'm Vin Finelli. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith, there was a story that Brooks Brothers, it's a men's clothier in New York City, has filed for bankruptcy. And it's the oldest men's retailer in the United States. I remember going into a store in Philadelphia called the Boyd store, B-O-Y-D. And that's where, that was a men's store. And that's when, if you worked at a job that required a suit, you dressed appropriately. Well, I don't know how the Boyd store is doing in Philadelphia, but Brooks Brothers, which would be a similar type clothier for men, is bankrupt. And so are a lot of other clothiers. And the reason I'm saying this is we used to try to look professional when we went to work. Now, not so much. If we have work to go to. And this is just one more sign, one more dot that you can connect of the collapse. We're going down. And I really believe that we're going to be continuing to go down for a couple decades. I don't think there's any turning this around quickly. Now, the government has said, oh yeah, prosperity's right around the corner. Well, they said that in 1929 as well. And prosperity was around the corner in 1946. That's how long it took, right after World War II. So I just wanted to mention that, there's so many signs right in front of our faces that this thing is big and we're going down. We're talking about locking down of apartment buildings. We're talking about locking down of states. We're talking about no movement in, no movement out. How does that work with truck drivers who are hauling products like food into New Jersey when New Jersey says, now, if you're coming from one of these states that we think is infected, you can't come in. How's that work? I don't think it works too well. Truck drivers are considered persona non grata because, they travel from place to place to place, and everybody knows they must be a carrier, right? So truck drivers are feeling the heat. People who wear masks are feeling the heat. People who don't wear masks are feeling the heat. It's like everybody against everybody. And I still have not changed my thoughts on the corona panic one iota. I have not. I believe there are people who are infected, and I believe they are carriers, and they don't even know they're carriers. They're infecting other people. People need to be conscious of their actions. And you look at these generally dumb young people who are reveling, and they are going to beaches, anywhere they can go to get out. And they even say, if they're infected, they don't care. And if they infect other people, they don't care. I got to tell you, a lot of people are surviving it, but it's no fun. I don't know anybody who says, you know what? I had a really bad cold, but it's okay. It was fun. People used to complain about getting the cold. They'd be down for 3, 4, 5 days. They hated it. And it was just a common cold. Not very many people died from the common cold. But it was miserable going through that experience. This thing can leave you brain and organ damage. I'm talking about COVID-19. And yet I still hear people saying it's a fake, it's fraud, and to use their term, BS. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It has destroyed the supply chain. I wanted to make mention of one thing before we continue, Guineith, and we've got Mike in Colorado on hold. How many of you are dependent on air conditioning systems for your survival? We are looking at a very, very hot summer. The reports that I'm reading are telling me that it's going to be a heat wave, and it's going to be really, really brutal. And I believe it, because what I see here at the farm, the land on our farm has turned into concrete. It's dry, it's cracking, and without water, the plants are dying. I think the trees are going to start losing their leaves soon because of the lack of water, lack of rain. So that brings me to air conditioning. So if you have a central air conditioning unit and it quits, what are you going to do? Or do you have a basement? Do you live in a place where it doesn't get very warm? Or do you live in an area that without air conditioning you're just going to die in the summer? What are you going to do? I have a suggestion, but I think the grid's going to be unstable. Now, I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong. So don't do anything because I mentioned it. Do your own research, please. Don't believe anything anyone says, including me. But here's a thought. If you think the grid is going to go down, and if you are dependent on air conditioning, and if you have no place else to go, and if you don't have a basement that's cool, You may decide that you want to get a window unit and isolate yourself to a specific room, like 5,000 BTUs, 4,000 BTUs. And that might be a pretty good way to go, as long as you have electricity. But what if you don't? Then you're going to need a generator, because it's really difficult to run an air conditioner on solar power. I don't care what anybody says. It really is difficult, because air conditioning takes a lot of watts. Watts equals current. So you may want to do what we have done. Go find a used air conditioner. That's a window unit that you can fabricate some way of sticking that darn thing in a window and run it on a generator if you have to. Because there's some places in the country that are just so hot you won't be able to live there. And if there's a panic to get out of Dodge because the grid quits, are you going to be able to get out of Dodge? And does the gas station along the way have a generator if they have no electricity? It can be a mad dash for the exits, which would be like the interstates and the roads out of town. So keep your tank topped off and consider looking into an air conditioning unit, a window unit, an older one, not one of these cheap new Chi-Com ones that will only last a couple years. Get one that you think will last a lot longer. And prepare to have a generator sized properly to operate it, and the fuel to run it. Gwyneth, any comments before I put Mike in Colorado on the air?
Okay. Well, around here, we typically get probably about 2 or 3 or 4 months on end where the temperature is in excess of 40 degrees Celsius every single day. And I don't have an air conditioner. And how we cope with those hot conditions is I have a mud brick house, and I'm acclimatized to the hot weather, because there was a time in history when air conditioners weren't invented, and people were acclimatized to the climate that they lived in. And if you do that, if you acclimatize yourself to the climate that you live in, then you will find that your body is able to cope with the temperature extremes of the place that you live in. Now, with me, if it ever got really, really cold here, I would not be able to cope because I'm not acclimatized to that. But you get people who live in New York City where it's the reverse situation, where you got 2 or 3 months of snow every year, and they think it's great. I couldn't imagine living there. But it's very, very important to keep your body acclimatized to the climate that you live in, because there's physiological changes that happen to your body over a period of years. And I know this because I actually grew up in New Zealand, which is, the maximum temperature that you'd ever get there would be 25 Celsius. Okay? So to come over here, and for the very first day that I was here, it was somewhere between 32 and 35 degrees Celsius in Australia, in Melbourne, and it felt like walking into an oven on that first day. Now a 32-degree day is absolutely nothing. It's just a nice warm spring day for me. But I think that this is something that people have to take into account when their air conditioner breaks. Should they go out and buy a new one, or should they allow their body to acclimatize back to the climate that they live in and just wear more clothes or wear fewer clothes accordingly? Does that make sense, Vincent? I'm just offering
very well
as an
said.
Alternative solution.
Very, very well said. So, class, air conditioning, we didn't always have air conditioning. It was invented in 1945, the window unit. The window air conditioner was invented in 1945, and it started to get more popular in the 1960s. Okay, the window air conditioning unit I'm talking about. And when Gwyneth mentioned that she experienced 40-degree days, 40 degrees Celsius, just to let you know, in Fahrenheit, that's 104. Now, 104 in the sun or 104 in the shade is hot. It's really hot. And I am seeing temperatures in the 90s here right now, and we haven't really peaked. So we're looking at temperatures in the hundreds or close to it. So please be careful and consider what I mentioned about air conditioning and what Guineith mentioned about air conditioning. Mike in Colorado, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Guineith.
Sure.
For one, yeah, hydration in extreme heat is probably one of your best defenses, so is shade. You know, Colorado with the altitude, we get below zero, and it's supposed to be above 95 all week coming up this week. So stay hydrated, and shade will really go a long way.
Yeah.
That being said, I wanted to ask real quickly, both of you, about 13 to 15 years ago, I noticed humanity's awareness of the money system and the banking system kind of got to a bigger proportion than I'd ever seen. And people were starting to stack silver, buy gold, and look into cryptos when they came out. My question is, if humanity loses or pushes itself away from the grip of the big banks who really do run the world, isn't that part of what China's trying to do? The Chinese model of control is something the banks can get back if they implement that worldwide. And I wonder right now, with COVID, with Victoria being taken over, if maybe it's not more about financial control as opposed to political.
Guineith?
Yeah, I would agree that it's political control that they're after, because Victoria is where Australia's postal and telecommunications systems all run out of. They all run out of Victoria. So if they've got Victoria, they've got control of the postal systems and the telecommunications. And they know it.
All right, hold that thought. We're going into a break. We'll be right back. Mike, if you'd like to hold, that'd be great. So economists are suggesting that in Europe there will be a deep recession for 2020. What's a deep recession? Well, somewhere around 10% reduction in gross domestic product. That seems ridiculous to me, that they would forecast a deep recession. We're in a depression already. So if you think about that, what is a deep recession? It looks like, we might have a deep recession in Europe in 2020. It's idiotic. The companies are going bankrupt. They're shutting down. Gas consumption, diesel consumption's down. Trucking's down. New trucking sales are down. New auto sales are down as much as 90% or more. Nobody's buying anything. People are broke. Food is scarce. There are supply shortages. Even in Australia right now, the Woolworths is a large food distribution company, a supermarket type operation. They are limiting how much vegetables, how much grains, how much pastas, and et cetera, cans, jars you can buy. Same thing here in the United States. And we're learning that the economists are suggesting that we might have a deep recession. We're already in the Depression. The Civil and Revolutionary War have started, the second one, I believe, in the United States. Those are my opinions. And so what do? Well, make sure you have everything that you need, because I believe that it's going to be very difficult to get those things in the future. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. Everything you said was 100% accurate from my experience. Even here in the metro area of Denver, every small business restaurant that I used to frequent, a couple of them have reopened. Most have shuttered. The repair shops for vacuums and washers and dryers and things like that, those are closed. And I think part of we've seen it coming, and you spoke of it before, when only the big corporate everything is still open. Corporations don't run the way people think business runs. They have a line of credit 24/7. They pay their payroll. They don't look at what they sold to see if they can pay their payroll. They just pay their payroll, and then they pay interest on their loans. That's a really important thing, because a small business doesn't run that way. You own many businesses, and if you don't generate revenue, you don't get to pay your people. So it's a different paradigm. And we've seen that.
Mike, why do you feel that I've owned many businesses? What makes you say that?
Well, your entrepreneur
I'm not saying it's not true.
Your entrepreneur spirit, plus I've listened to you for years, and I know you owned a computer business. There's probably a lot more that you haven't spoke of, would be my guess.
That's true. Everything you said is true. And yes, I have owned a number of businesses. And I'm not I'm not one of these guys who, can make magic happen. It's work. I mean, it's effort, it's persistence, and it's inventiveness and ingenuity that make it happen. And I haven't gotten, not every time have I gotten all those ingredients in one place at the same time. So I've had, I got plenty of bruises. I mean, I really do. I know lots of things, like Edison, I know lots of things that don't work. But, Mike, I wanted to ask you, from what perspective are you saying these things? What is your area of expertise, if I may ask?
That's a hard one to quantify as far as an area of expertise. I'm really great with pattern recognition. It's something I've had since I was a little kid, and I can see a few things.
That would be.
Go ahead.
Would you say that would that be somewhat defined as the ability to estimate?
Yes.
I agree with that.
I work at a Speedway, which is in the news right now, and I don't want to get into that too much, but we hosted a 4th of July event against the wishes of the county, so now we're in court. But that day, at the end of at 11 o'clock at night, my boss said, "How many people do you think we had?" And I said, "I bet we're probably between about 7,100 and 7,800. And it was 7,300. So, yeah, I have my estimations are pretty good.
Yeah, and see, the reason I asked that, the ability to estimate is, in my opinion, based on experience and logic. And so if you don't have experience with things, you can't estimate. And that's one of the problems that we have with our children in the educational system today. They are learning via the screen. They're not feeling and touching the reality, the real things. So they're having trouble estimating. And that's a big problem, because if you estimate, you can't run a business. It's impossible. Mike, you're certainly welcome to stay with us if you'd like. Class, Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Mike is in Colorado, and I'm fascinated with something that Mike said. And I just have to ask this question. Mike, I believe that you said that you work for Speedway. Now, I assume that's the Speedway fuel and convenience stores. Is that what we're talking about?
No, I'm sorry. It's a Speedway drag strip. A big arena venue.
Okay.
Not arena venue, outdoor venue.
Okay. I've been to several of them in the East Coast. I used to race at one of the largest in the country, at least at the time, and I raced my AMX and my Lotus Europa until they kicked me out for racing an English sports car in the U.S. Hot Rod Association. They said I could not compete because my car, when you turned it upside down, it says "Made in England." But anyway, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I had a question for Mike as well. Just one more question. Mike, I believe you mentioned that you've listened to us for years. What would you say specifically of me? I don't want to put anybody else on the spot, but in terms of accuracy of things I have said over the years, would you find that they are accurate, less than accurate, not accurate at all? What would you say?
I would say more accurate than not by a strong percentage. I first started listening to you because of a connection to a different network years ago, but then I understood from where you were coming, and anytime you mentioned, like, I bought those Bofang radios, pardon me, and everything you said about it was 100% true. You didn't oversell it, you didn't undersell it, you weren't making money for it, so you weren't really selling it. You were just commenting on the value you can get from a shortwave radio that's portable. And I've followed, not medical advice that I hear, but medical thinking about natural herbs and, some different things. And so far, you've yet to steer me wrong, sir. And I take responsibility for that.
I really appreciate.
I don't think you put it on anybody.
I really appreciate that, and
yeah.
I appreciate that. And when I talk about a product, like for example, Guineith mentioned The Art of War by Sun Tsu, and I know I've got a copy. We've got thousands of volumes, and unfortunately, we haven't unpacked all the boxes in 15 years, so I don't know where it is. So I was able to find another copy very inexpensively, and I bought it, while we're on the air. The Art of War by Sun Tsu. I bought it right on the internet, and it was very inexpensive. It was less than $10 for hardback, and I prefer hardbacks. So I did that because I want to read it again. And when it comes to the Bofang radios, I really liked them. I mean, they're kind of cheesy in some respects. They've gotten better. The volume controls wear out, so I bought some replacement volume controls for the old ones. But the newer ones have a better antenna and they travel farther. So for our farm, if I want to talk to somebody in our farm and I want to buy a radio that is not Asian, I'm out of luck. There's nothing I can buy to communicate with that's portable that is not made in China. Nothing. So I'm stuck. So I had to buy Bofang radios. And, I think I paid about maybe 5 of them for $130, something like that. And they go for a couple miles. And they really work well. So when I recommend something, it's not because Bofang or some other company is paying me. Nobody pays me to do anything. It's only because I want to, only because I've researched the product, only because I think it's a good value. Just like when I talked about air conditioners today, window air conditioners. I'm not being compensated by anybody. I'm not being compensated by Guns 80. They're going to be on tomorrow. But I think it's something that we should know about. And by the way, class, USA Prepares has no income. Okay. There's nothing that you can do. There's no donate button. There's nothing you can do to enrich me. It's impossible. Because I don't have a mechanism for it, nor would I accept it. And by the way, people have asked me, hey, will you take a donation? I've had people call me. They've somehow figured out how to contact me, and they say they want to give me money. And I say, no, it can't be done. How can I do it? You can't do it. You can't do it.
Well, that's admirable.
Any other comments, Mike?
Thanks for taking my call. Good to talk to you guys.
Okay, thank you. I only do this because I want to. I only do it because I want to. It's not ego. I feel the necessity to educate people for things I think they might want to know about, if they want to know about them. If they don't want to know about them, I don't want to force anybody to do anything. But if you're interested in some things that I've learned the hard way through bruises and, hitting my thumb with a hammer kind of things, I'll be glad to share them. And that's what we do. Mike, I really appreciate your call. And if I ever get my AMX back together, which I still have, my AMX 1968 394 speed, I'd love to take it out on the track.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Do they still race?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. They still race AMXs? I think we just lost Mike. Okay. Guineith, the Queen. What's up with the Queen? Does she or doesn't she have coronavirus, COVID-19? What do you think?
Information regarding that topic in the press is more or less shut down, but I think she's either had it or she has got it, or she's recovering from it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was something that was released in the women's magazine type media a few months ago about her having the coronavirus and, feeling quite ill, wanting to sort of wind back her public work. And, I would say that she probably, I heard a rumor that she and Prince Charles went and met with a member of the European royalty back over last Christmas/New Year's, and that they contracted it at that time. And that would be quite concerning if that's true, because we are now 6 months after that time, and she's still not in the limelight. she's still not really doing too many public events. So that would indicate that she's probably not really well. And, I think that Charles is also not very well. And, I would like to remind the class that a number of years ago I had a dream where Princess Diana came to visit me in the dream, and she said that the Queen is old and ill, and Wills needs to prepare himself to be the king. And the message that I got was that Charles would never sit on the throne. And that was the message that I got in the dream. And, and I saw her, and I saw somebody with her as well. It seemed to be one of her servants who was, I was in a building and I went up an elevator, and a servant met me and escorted me to meet Princess Diana, and I met Princess Diana in a library in this dream, and the servant was standing by. And I think that the servant was the man who died with her. There was one of her servants actually died with her, one of her bodyguards or something. I think it was the driver, maybe. Anyway, like I say, I think that she's really, really not well. And I think that before long that we will be looking at having a new king, and I don't think that king is going to be Prince Charles. I think that it's going to be Prince William. It's going to be King William. I think it will be William II. I think there's only ever been one other English king called William, and that was William the Conqueror. So yeah, normally you don't say William the First or William the Second or anything, because there's only been one, and that was William the Conqueror. So that would make King William the Second. So I think that that's what's happened. That she's never going to recover fully now, because she is a very old lady. She was born in 1926, if my memory serves me correctly. Yeah, I think that she was born, you would be able to check that fairly easily with the internet, but if she was born in 1926, that would make her, 94 years old. That's quite an age.
And during World War II, she wanted to know how things worked, and she learned how to drive a tank.
Yeah. And she learned how to shoot a carbine.
Mm-hmm.
So if she ever got into trouble, then she would be able to defend herself.
She was born in.
Yeah.
You're right. She was born in 1926, and she's 94.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that because it was the same year that my grandparents emigrated to Australia. And my grandmother was actually, quite good friends with the Queen Mother back in England, because this was another topic that we were going to get onto today, was the topic of the Blue Bloods. My grandmother was quite good friends with the Queen Mother before she was the Queen Mother, and she was asked to be the royal nanny. She had to politely decline because she had recently married, and they had decided to emigrate to Australia. And because of that, my cousin of my grandmother became the royal nanny instead, and that was Nanny Crawford, was a cousin of my grandmother. So that Nanny Crawford became quite famous a number of years ago because she wrote an unauthorized biography of time working in the royal household, which did not go down well with Her Majesty. And but anyway, like I say, that was I remembered that it was 1926 because of that little historical factoid that that my grandmother had asked. Yeah.
Do you have any historical factoids that about royalty that maybe most people don't know about? Maybe some unauthorized royal factoids that you can share?
I don't know. I know about Henry VIII.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll tell you, hold that thought, and I'll give you some statistics about the corona panic when we come back. Just a couple quick thoughts. There's some quotes by the President of the United States, and one of them, he said, quote, "And again, we've had tremendous success beyond what people would have thought," end quote. He's talking about the coronavirus. Well, here are the numbers. And I've heard the stories that the numbers are too high, the numbers are too low. They're counting people that are, died of other causes. They're attributing everything they can to the coronavirus as a reason for death. And I've also heard and read that the numbers are underreported because the hospitals don't want to say how miserably they're failing. So what's the truth? I don't know. But here are the reported numbers. So we're having tremendous success with dealing with the coronavirus, according to the President, and over 3 million people have been infected. 134,140 have died. As of midnight last night, 17,419 new cases in the United States. So if that's tremendous success, I'd hate to see what failure looks like. Can you imagine that? So please, class, be careful. And I know there are talk radio shows. I've actually spent a little bit of time listening to them, and I just can't believe what I'm hearing. That this is fake, this is fraud, and to use their terms, this is BS. I can't believe it. Now, I do believe it's being used as the reason to lock us down, the reason to shut down American businesses, the reason to enhance the wealth of the already filthy rich, with an underscore on the word filthy. Guineith, are there any royal secrets that you think you could share with us that people might not have heard about?
Okay. I would like to, talk about, Henry VIII, because that, this is where a lot of the modern royalty traditions came from, was Henry VIII. He was bombastic, okay? And I believe that he is been reincarnated back into the royal family, and that in his present incarnation that he is Prince Harry. Because if you look at a photo of Prince Harry and you compare it to a painting of Henry VIII, then you're just about looking at the same guy. Okay? The family resemblance between these two people is absolutely extraordinary, but it's more than a family resemblance. I believe that this is this man reincarnated back into the royal family, and I think that he's a bit hacked off, that he realizes now that he will probably never be the king, because once upon a time he was second in line to the throne, or third in line to the throne, rather. And now, with every child that Wills and Kate are having, he's pushed one more line back in the line. You know what I mean? And I think that there is a little bit of bitterness developing there. And I think that Meghan Markle is the reincarnation of Anne of Cleves, which was Henry VIII's wife. Because, you look at Anne of Cleves, and you look at Meghan Markle, you look at the two of them together, and this is how you judge about reincarnation. You have to look at the person as a whole being. You look at the people around them, and it's very common for souls to reincarnate into groups, okay? And that can include friends, and it can include enemies as well. And I know myself that I've, reincarnated back into this body on this earth, the reincarnation of George Wilson, and my husband was the reincarnation of Bartholomew Roberts, and the man who killed him, Bartholomew Roberts, was Shalona Ogle, and I believe that Shalona Ogle has also been reincarnated as Melbourne gangster Mick Gatto, because and Mick Gatto tried to murder my husband by shooting him attempting to shoot him in the throat with a shotgun. And that is, so close. It's like karma happening. This is how it happens, and I believe this is happening with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that they are playing out their karma of Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves. And in the end, Henry VIII grew to be about 400 pounds, okay? And when he had his armour on, he was almost 550 pounds. They had to get a crane to get him to get on horseback when he wanted to go for a horse ride. And he loved to go horse riding. And, it's the thing is, he would break the backs of his horses, sometimes in a matter of hours. And in the end, he couldn't make any decisions on his own. Every decision that Henry VIII had to make, he made it by consulting with Anne of Cleves. And that's exactly what Prince Harry's doing in this life. And I think that they need to, sort of be aware of what's going on